Okay, so welcome to COFMUG February 2018 edition. This is our 15th anniversary of COFMUG meetings. COFMUG first met on February 11th, 2003. So it's been a crazy and long 15 years, of which I've only been witness to about 9 of. So we will go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to start off with doing a quick introduction to the woman of FileMaker. I promised Laura, a good friend of mine in the community, that I would cover this quick presentation just as a start off to introduce kind of their mission and what they're doing. So the woman of FileMaker group provides a number of different services geared at fostering female developers in our community to kind of excel and become better developers and get involved in the FileMaker community as well. It's actually turned into quite a large lunch event at DevCon every year, the Women of FileMaker Luncheon, where they all get together and kind of share their stories. And I can't think of one woman of FileMaker member that I've ever met that I haven't liked. They're all wonderful people. So I'm glad I've volunteered my time to help them as well, and I thought I would pass this on as well. So they provide mentoring for developers. They have a kind of pool of contacts set up for if you want to mentor and train somebody for gratis, you can. They have networking opportunities. Recently, they started providing DevCon scholarships, which is where they will take a first-year DevCon attendee and sponsor their trip to DevCon, which is a worthy cause. And then the leadership opportunities that come out of all of that. So their mentorship program started off in 2017. They had 29 people sign up. If you want to join that as well, you can do so at womenofilemaker.com/mentoring. Their scholarship program also kicked off last year as well. They funded 2 scholarships. They did all of that in 3 days of fundraising, or their goal was 2 things. Sorry, I'm reading this off. I didn't get to prepare these slides before. I just got them this afternoon. Their goal was 2 scholarships funded. They ended up with 3 scholarships awarded. They had 30 applicants, 3 days fundraising. So their 2018 goals are to provide 4 scholarships. Fundraising has already started. Applications have already started as well. The deadline is Friday, March 16th, which is actually when CQDF is happening in Montreal. So their goal are those 4 scholarships. It's $7,500. You can donate on the website, GoFundMe.com, Women of FM DevCon Scholarships. If you can't remember that, just go to womenofilemaker.com and it's linked on their page. To apply for a scholarship, we've only got dudes here today, so but if you do know a female that would make a good applicant, hasn't been to DevCon before, is a first-time attendee, please have them fill out those applications at womenofilemaker.com/scholarship. And if you know somebody that applied and did not get it in previous years, wasn't able to go to DevCon, have them apply again. So that's a thanks from Laura Betts, who's close by to us in Pittsburgh. And again, a good friend and community activist that has been contributing to this cause. All right, so now we are going to get into our function of the day, which is get sort state. And the reason I chose this function is because it's one of the functions that's been around since FileMaker 6. So this function was here when COFMUG started, and it's still here today. So let's do a quick demo file. open up, get sort state. Zoom in here. So I've got a data source in here, just something that I downloaded off of Barton Dunning's page. He's got a contacts database you can download for free. I've got a simple sort set up by sorting by state, and I've got an alt sort that sorts by last name. So get sort state is a Boolean value that returns 0 if it's unsorted and 1 if it is sorted.
Oh, nice. I like it.
So you can easily tell if things are in natural order or if they're in a sorted order. So if I press sort, you'll see I've grouped things together by state here. And now if I hit get sort, it's going to just give me a 1. So a real quick use of something you can do with this is you can check for if a record set is already sorted, and you can block further sorting actions. So if you have a custom menu where you're overriding the sort command, you can override it so that you allow the sort dialog to pop up if it's been sorted and then block it if it's already sorted. So I'm going to click this button, it's going to tell me this is already sorted because I wrote a script that does that. So I've got a script in here for my button bar, just alt sort, if gets its sort state is greater than 0, already sorted, exit script. Otherwise, sort the records, do that. So if I go back here and I unsort my records and then I hit alt sort again, it'll now sort for me. That's last name ascending. And then that check isn't on this first button. So if I wanted to go back to state order, I could. So that's it. Is there a 2 that's returned in any case? Do you know? I need to look this up. I'm going to find the documentation page. Get sort state, FileMaker. 12 documentation usually comes up first. There is a 2.
Semi-sorted, there you go.
So if the records are in an active table and are partially sorted. So what that means for the YouTube crowd later on is that if you go in this sort dialog, there's a little option down here that says keep the records in sorted order. And what that does is any record that gets changed or added or deleted so that it affects the sort order of your found set, it's going to resort those automatically. So if I was to uncheck this, okay, so we're sorted by state right now. I'm going to uncheck this box and hit sort. And I'm going to add a new record. And I'm going to give this record Kentucky, courtesy of Beverly. A little love for Kentucky there. You'll notice here that Kentucky didn't automatically go back up. And if I get sort state now, there's my 2. So that means that I've done something that has thrown it out of my sort state. So now I can programmatically check for that number 2, as well as say, oh, yeah, you need to resort. This comes in and to be beneficial, like if you're doing sorting that takes a long time. So you might not want to keep records, and you might want to sort once and then not keep the records in the sorted order, because if it constantly has to resort, like on an unstored calculation, every change is going to cause that dialog to pop up and sort again, and you'll have to wait. So what you might want to do is if you set that up, and then you have like a report printing script where you want to go print a report, you might want to check to see if that number's 2. Because if it is, that means something changed and you have to resort before you run that report. But if it's still 1, that means nothing's changed, you're good to go. And if it's 0, that means the user unsorted everything and you need to resort. So, other uses, Dave, Joe?
I was thinking in particular of, you're talking about interface elements and kind of lighting things up. If it goes 2, I might relight up the sort button, even though they had previously hit it, so I can remind them that this data is not as sorted as they previously thought.
Right. So that would be something like if you were, let's say I took this here, I went in my inspector and I went hide object when get sort state not equals 1. So if sort state was 1, it would hide this sort button. And right now, it's 2. So it hit that sort button. So if I
You almost want to invert that logic.
Yeah, equals 1, sorry.
Yeah.
It should have been, yeah. It's after 5.
I've never made that mistake in my entire life.
So if I sort, that sort button disappears. But if I do something else, that sort button reappears. So that's a good, it's a good case.
I was thinking more just giving it like a little glow or a drop shadow or something, but yeah.
Conditional formatting, or Yep. The sky is the limit. Now that they've added hide object and conditional formatting. All right, so gives you a couple notes down here. I'll zoom in on when records are imported from another file previously found and sorted. They may exist in a semi-sorted state. So again, that's may happen if you import records. It may throw it out of things. If you specify a context, so this is kind of important. So if you use this in a field that's contextual, it's only going to be evaluated on that context. So say, for instance, if it's sorted in one window and you have a calculation that's based on that context and you open up a different window and that field is in that different window on a different layout or something, it may return an unexpected result because it's now evaluating through that relationship to the other context. So that's something to keep in mind if you use this in a calculation somewhere. And then FileMaker always links to its helpful knowledge base about context. Right. Okay. I think we are good. So while we're here, quick note aside, since this is the first meeting since we got, well, technically it's the second meeting since we got this page, but first that I remembered to pull it up. This is our new COFMUG page, home, so to speak. If you go to COFMUG.com, it redirects you here now. So we're no longer on the WordPress page, we're no longer posting our information in 2 places. And actually our Google group is going to go away as well. So I am actually not logged into this. I'm going to log in. So all you need to do to subscribe to our COFMUG user group is log in, go to COFMUG.com, log into the community, and go up here and follow this. And you can follow it here, you can follow it in your inbox as well. I believe checking both gets you notifications by email. So meeting announcements are here. Our entire meeting schedule all the way through November is here. We'll be posting notes. We'll be posting the GoToMeeting links as we broadcast meetings. We'll be posting content, recordings, history. We're carrying over all of our files from the old site, posting them here. If you have a question that you want to ask just to our user group, you can post it here. If you have files that you want to share, if you want to make a poll for, hey, I'm in Columbus and I'm thinking about doing something like this, make a poll. Have at it. FileMaker has provided us this at no cost. It's part of their new initiative kind of to host these kinds of spaces. I think we're one of 5 user groups in the country that got this privilege, so nice. In the world, not just the country. So please use the space. Please don't be shy to post your thoughts on anything, feedback from the meeting. It's all going to be driven by this community now. So it's just community.filemaker.com/group/COFMUG, or just go to COFMUG.com, COFMUG. All right, back to the slides. Oops, that's later. So we are in get sort state. So our topic of today, and actually I did want to go back to that community for one more thing. again, this is really all about 15 years of COFMUG today. So we're going to focus on doing kind of a comparison as to what has changed in FileMaker over the last 15 wonderful years. So 2/11/2003 was our start, and I was going to start actually by going and showing you guys this. I posted this in our About COFMUG page. And we'll see if it comes up here. So this is our extremely old website through the Dayback Machine, but this was kind of a, after the first user group meeting, they actually wrote this detailed account of everything that happened at the meeting. They took meeting minutes, which I thought was kind of cool. It gave us a lot of information. This page specifically is almost what all of our history is based on in our About Us page. So a lot of this is familiar. So, when this was first founded, the closest user groups to us were Chicago and Washington, D.C. So it's a bit of a hike. We pick up people from Dayton that are 45 minutes away that drive here, but could you imagine driving a 10-hour round trip to Chicago to go to a FileMaker meeting? When this did meet, it met quarterly. They were talking about some stuff like the FileMaker Solutions Alliance, which has been changed since now to the SBA, Solutions Bundle Agreement, or Solutions Bundle Alliance, I forget. Changes depending on who you talk to, but it's not the FSA anymore. So FSA has been replaced by FBA, and they're the FileMaker Business Alliance, and that's the general, I'm a developer, I want to be acknowledged by FileMaker, listed in their directory. Then the Solutions Bundle Agreement, which is, I think why I call it agreement, is for vertical market product developers that want to pre-purchase licenses to bundle with their products. So Solutions Bundle Agreement. 3 levels back then, subscriber, associate, and partner. Now there's just FBA, FBA Platinum. And qualify for Platinum, it's juried, but basically you have to sell a lot of FileMaker, have a lot of clients. Partner level FSA members are the creme de la creme of FileMaker developers, must undergo many rounds of tests and business reviews. Only 24 partner companies. Columbus is blessed with 2 of them, Interactive Inc. Incorporated and Cleveland Consulting. So Interactive Inc. I don't think even does FileMaker anymore. That's not you.
No.
But Cleveland Consulting is still around.
Yep.
Even comes to our meetings every now and then. So there's a couple other names you'll see as we go through this that, Smallco, that's Albert Hiram Alvarez out of Florida. So he was kicking it around 15 years ago. He does a lot of training now. I believe they won the FileMaker Excellence Award last year for community, for training contributions, I believe. They held the FileMaker Masterclass. That was their little claim to fame. The 3-day long intensive training course for 0 to 60 for FileMaker. Address information verified by a web service linking the USPS. So yes, even 15 years ago, people were doing API integrations with FileMaker. It's great. It's like nothing has changed, right? So yeah. We'll scroll through. Here's another familiar name, Dan Weiss, president of, this should say Adatasol, right? Not Buddy Systems. At some point in time, he upgraded the name, and he's a platinum partner now. Genealogy solution was presented. We're talking about trials of FileMaker. what frustrations those have caused. So this is a really interesting read, but one name I wanted to point out, and I actually meant to reach out to him and see if he could show up today, and he wasn't able to make it. But Roy Gordon, who is pretty much I call him the walking Rolodex of FileMaker Go information, because he knows more about FileMaker Go than anybody I know. FileMaker Tic-Tac-Toe game. Couldn't find a copy of it anywhere, but if anybody wants to recreate that, post it in our community. It'd be a nice little fun project, right? And then a couple tips and tricks. So this was a long meeting. You know, I think something like 3 hours of all content. And our meetings now are only really an hour and a half an hour of social time, hour and a half of presentations. Disappearing portal tricks, adding merge fields to buttons, bar charts, plugins, mod log demo, and then Q&As. Attendees were 50-50 in terms of developers. So today we've got, well, I don't even know how to categorize it. Like with you two, we've got somebody who is almost still consulting in FileMaker. We've got Dave, who only sells to FileMaker developers now and doesn't do any FileMaker development.
A developer.
So what do we say, 2.5 out of 4 developers here today? And Mark, well, hopefully you'll get back into it.
I'm a user.
But are you a hobby user? You're not charging people for your development time.
Correct.
So you're not a consultant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a hard number to peg too, because Joe's sitting here with his giant Alienware laptop. That's not really a Mac, but he also owns a Mac. So. And lastly, if this still rings true today, evangelism is good. So, you know, we always try to foster the FileMaker community in Columbus, but, you know, we still need help from time to time. Bring your friends.
I'll talk to you later. I've got some marketing ideas.
Yeah. So that was our history. So what has happened in 15 years, and how we're going to approach this is Dave and Joe and I kind of came up with a list of like, this is everything that's come out since FileMaker 6, which was the current version when the user group started. So it's come 10 versions. So what in the last 10 versions has monumentally changed what we do with FileMaker? And since it's been 15 years, we're going to choose 15 things. So these are not presented in any specific order, mostly because it was too much work and I didn't feel like trying to rank them 15 to 1, and it would be obviously highly opinionated. So at least these 15 results are divided amongst a 75% representation of our user group tonight. So, all right, so let's talk about these. The top 15 investments. I should have had this slide up while I just said that last bit. Sorry. That's what happens when you make the slides like an hour before the meeting, right? All right, so number 1, and this is big. Joe listed this in his biggest achievements, and I definitely agree. FileMaker Go came out when iOS 4 was a thing, so it's been a while, but it's really not been a while, has it? I mean, less than 8 years in the wild, so it's only been around about, what, like a third or less time that FileMaker has been a platform. So came out in FileMaker 11, so just only 5 versions ago. But I mean, this has fundamentally changed how people market FileMaker as a product and what it can do. You know, there were some things that you could do with older versions of FileMaker. There was even FM Mobile for Palm Pilot back in the day. There was an iOS app in the App Store before FileMaker Go came along. It was $49.95, and I think it just ran like XML web publishing, and it was basically like IWP for iOS or something like that. But when this came along and you had the ability to just take your FileMaker file and put it on a phone or a tablet, it's huge. And to this day, it's come out as an even bigger thing that they're improving on. So they're talking about in the roadmap, different things that they're going to be doing. In version 15, they came out with the iOS SDK, which is huge. The ability to compile your app into an actual app. Just say, drop your FileMaker file in here, change some settings, and you've got an actual app. Not requiring to download a FileMaker Go anymore is huge. So I think the way they approached it over the history, when it first came out, it cost $20 for the phone version and $40 for the iPad version. They switched that around so the licensing was based on the server, not for the user. So ever since it's been free, I know they throw out the quote at DevCon every year, but it's been downloaded something like 3 million times, or just a huge number of FileMaker Go installs have been out there.
Yeah, I'd like to separate FileMaker Go into like 2 unique phases of like, it's new and novel and neat, but not very useful. It's so slow, and we've got to rely on like expensive sync solutions or lots of development to get a viable product. Versus like around 14 and 15, they sped up the app and FileMaker server so much that to a large degree, those types of solutions aren't necessary for a lot of users. And now for the projects that I work on, it's just as reliable as FileMaker Pro. And I have one customer that has 150 employees that use FileMaker Go every day.
Reliability is huge, but the fact that they keep adding features to it is big too. When they added iBeacons in 15 or 14. Yeah, when they added iBeacons, it opened up a whole new market of people you could sell to: museums, coffee shops, inventory. We used it in a huge inventory warehouse with 100 users, and it's sensing when they hit beacons, and it's preloading the information for that area. It's caching the information for that area as they were walking into it, because you're talking about a giant warehouse with millions of products. So how do you increase that performance? Well, before iBeacons came along, you were downloading 2 million records into an iPad. But now it's the ability to run some of that stuff a little bit in the background. So FileMaker Go definitely tops on the list, and definitely will continue. I mean, as long as iPhones and iPads are still a thing.
I think the biggest feature, the most underrated feature that they ever released with FileMaker Go was its ability to reconnect to the server and not lose its local cache. So if you are interrupted, you don't have to like re-download 400 megs of data. The server just reconnects and keeps going.
As long as it works.
It's worked for me.
I've had it not work before, and it's been frustrating. But it was more of a thing on the server side and people using cellular. So, yeah. It eventually gives up if it can't reach back.
I have all like Wi-Fi items.
Yeah. All right. Courtesy of Dave. I mean, I knew this was in here regardless of who put it in here. But obviously, like, this was the big shocker whenever I talk to people about, like, how FileMaker has changed over the last, 14 years now. So this would have been rolling out right after COFMUG first met. Is just the ability to put more than one data table in the same file. And I didn't realize how big of a thing this was until I had to do my first FileMaker 5 conversion. And I had some ungodly amount of files, like 55 files or something. And it was giving me nightmares of my first FileMaker project where I had to convert a FoxPro database where every single view was its own separate file. So the ability to do your entire application in one file is amazing. It's also a little scary to a lot of people, Most other platform developers, when you tell them, when they ask like, okay, I'm ready to move the files over, and you're like, file. they look at you like, what? Oh, like what happens if that one file corrupts? And you're like, backups. But the ability to take clones and stuff like that, helps out a lot. But it makes it a lot more portable, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with large amounts of tables. So there's this entire generation of FileMaker development that happened between, I would say, version 7 and version 10, where people were still trying to figure out how to use table occurrences in FileMaker 7. So like you'll know when you open up one of those files and you look in the relationship graph, and it just looks like.
But there was like a popular like automation utility at the time, like convert your old solution to an MP7 file.
Yeah.
It was just like it just indiscriminately populated the relationship graph.
Yeah.
And it resolved the relationships, but it was just chaos. And then a couple of those that.
So if you've ever seen one of those scatter charts where you can like click on a single node, and out of the cloud of 1,000 things, it shows you the 8 things they're related to. That's the kind of relationship graph I'm talking about. When you open the relationship graph and it's the 10,000 nodes, but you can't just click on one and highlight the one that it's related to. You kind of have to hunt through. So as FileMaker has progressed, and a newer generation that came in post FileMaker 7 of developers, myself included, I started in version 8 or 8.5. So like when I started in FileMaker, I really didn't have any idea that this had been a thing just a few years ago. We've developed the standards, so like selector connectors come along as a way to like drastically reduce the number of tables you have. People have defined the relationship graph, spoken wheel, that type of thing.
Yeah, there's a really good white paper out there that goes through like the history of additional graph and like 6 or so different like named organizational schemas that were available.
And then the other half of this, of course, is the ability to actually use multi-predicate relationships. At some point in time later on, they also added the ability to do Cartesian Joins. I don't think it was in 7. It was like 9 or 10.
Okay.
Oh
yeah, we were still doing 1-to-1.
So that's what makes me like realize how new I am. I can't imagine making a solution without those two things.
Right.
Multi-predicate relationships and multi-step relationships, as just an example.
Yeah.
If you designed a system with or without, with multi-predicate relationships and multi-step relationships, the number of fields in your tables would drop by about half.
Yeah.
Because there were so many fields that we were creating just for the purposes of making special relationships work. Because they all had to be exact matches.
Yeah.
The things that we had to do to make date ranges work. The things that we had to do to get data from a table that was 5 steps away, pipelined all the way over. It was either a series of chain things or an extra key that you brought over just so you could temporarily connect to someplace else.
And it's not even just steps, it's 5 files away.
Well, yeah, there's that too. You're going to each of those files to make a relationship one more step. And so to get a value from one file to something 5 files away might require 5, 6, 7 calculation fields.
Or it might require running a step, like perform script that performs a script in another file, and then that script performs a script in another file, and then that script performs a script in another file, all the way down, and then all the way back, returning the results of that chain. So it's basically artificial recursion for artificial stack recursion for scripts that you had to do because you couldn't necessarily like reference that stuff directly because that table is no longer in the same file. So obviously, I mean, FileMaker 7 was, it's still the defining turning point when things changed. I mean, you can say like the file format changed between FP6 and FP7, you know, yeah, the file format changed, but like really, like up until that point, the structure was generally the same. And all the way between 7 and 12, you know, you look at the change from 7 to 12, or 11 to 12, the big changes were interface changes. Like the structure, the underlying structure didn't really change at all. So 7, you know, April 2004, is really the big turning point for what I would consider modern FileMaker structure.
I have plenty of criticism for FileMaker, as you know, but one thing I really like about the way they roll out versions is there's always a lot of continuity between versions. Like
Yes.
you look at FileMaker 11 and 16, a lot has changed, but every step of the way, they're kind of easing you into the next thing.
Yeah.
And I've talked to the engineering team before, and you know,
So many environments do that they just
Yeah.
pull the rug out from under you.
right. So I mean, when FileMaker came out with 12, they could have just said like, sorry, but your FP7 files won't work. They could have not built a conversion utility for it. They could have said like, import your files, redo your layouts, use it new. But they didn't. They wanted that continuity. So it's something they planned for too. So you'll see features that develop over time as well. Like 12 is a huge step in revamping the UI. Okay, great. Now that we've done the UI part of that, let's roll out a brand new like web product in 13.
Or make it possible for you to do your own things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Control your own themes in 13, and then down the line, now that we've done this, we can add actual new parts like the navigation parts. They were able to add it. So you know, it's a multi-step process. They're just now in recent years coming out with kind of exposing that process to us so that we know, like in the roadmap, that stuff is coming. But that roadmap's always been there. They just weren't sharing it before because they wanted to keep it under wraps, keep it special.
Well, and if you don't get something done in time,
Yeah, there's no penalty because
you don't take
know.
crap from the developer community.
So the roadmap doesn't promise anything. It says these are immediate priorities, these are lesser priorities, this is stuff under consideration, and this is stuff we have considered but is currently on hold. And it's really driven by community demand and market demand. So the more you get in the community and say like, man, I really need field level aliasing already, guys. Come on. Like, that's the type of feedback that actually drives it. So getting to DevCon and talking to staff from FileMaker and saying like, this is my use case, this is frustrating me for business. If you can present it in a business perspective that says, I'm having difficulty selling your product because I can't do this, is what really all levels of FileMaker staff listens to that. And I'm not trying to like tell you any surreptitious way to advocate the FileMaker, but it's true. If it's true to you, then, and they don't know that, tell them, because then at least they'll know that somebody has a legitimate business demand for a feature. And that's how most of these features come along. I mean, the FileMaker Go, you know, comes along because everybody's like, I can't deal with this $40 app, you know, like, and I really want to install FileMaker on my iPad, but I can't because it's not a computer. So
Yeah, but the big problem with like 11 FileMaker Go wasn't the cost, it was the fact that they didn't have a good way to manage licensing for organizations.
yeah,
Everybody had to personally register their app.
right, but they got there.
Yeah, they got there by giving it away. And
Yeah.
we'll just move the cost over to the server, put the licensing there.
Yeah, they got there. I remember when FileMaker first came out, and I said they're not going to last, or when Go first came out, like you and I were in the office, and I was like, they're going to figure out a way. They made it free in version 12, and I was like, it's not going to be free. They're going to add keys to the server in 13.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like here's the fishing rod. I'm like, come on. All right. ESS, July 2007. FileMaker 9, so an also more recent but very valuable feature of FileMaker. So,
I always forget about this.
yeah,
I
right?
didn't use it in one of my projects, and I still forget it exists.
Not only does it exist, but as recent as, was it 16 that they added support for DB2?
They added something.
Within the last two versions, they've added
Postgres and something else.
They've added support for SQL Express, DB2, and I think something, maybe the latest version of Oracle. But I mean, this is huge because if anybody here or listening to this has used something like Crystal reports, where trying to write like a query and then create an interface for that query is just insane. The amount of work it takes. Like, I got into Crystal reports when I had to deal with it as during a project that FileMaker was replacing Crystal reports because like it had gotten so out of hand because people were, writing and saving queries, and they're like, we now have 40,000 reports in Crystal reports, and we can no longer find our reports. So ESS really opened the door for FileMaker to kind of put itself in that professional level database market. Because it was something where, people were buying Crystal reports because FileMaker couldn't connect to SQL and aggregate data and make a report out of it. So ESS rolls along in 2007, and suddenly you can use FileMaker without any FileMaker data tables at all. You just use it as a front end for ESS data, and it works. You do all the same development just like you would in FileMaker, and it works. And it's fast, very fast, and fast equals cheaper, and cheaper means you get more business. So, well, in most cases.
What's it stand for? What's the
External SQL source? Yeah.
Sources.
Sources,
Okay.
external SQL sources. So it supports MySQL, so you can tie it into websites to pull web data. It supports Microsoft SQL. It supports a number of different formats, Oracle, DB2. There's one I'm forgetting.
The reporting side is really cool. The other killer feature of that is the ability to edit a value in a served SQL system with nothing more complicated than a relationship in a set field. Like you just draw the line, you're like, okay, just fix that status. Put a 1 in that field or something like that. You just set field and move on. And particularly when you're doing a small edit like that, the performance was always fantastic. It was just think and move on.
The thing that blew somebody's mind for me when I showed it to them was just find mode. Because having to write a query in Crystal reports, you're still writing a SQL stored procedure. Like you're writing the code for that query. So you have to know the table name, the field names, and everything. And then I present you this interface that I built in 10 seconds, where you can just do Control F and search any field. You have an operators menu where you can use operators. You have multiple requests, so you can do these complicated queries. And you can save those if you want on a per user basis. Yeah, icing on the cake. All right. I wonder how fast we're moving through these if we're going. I think we're going quick enough. Custom functions. Like I said, FileMaker 7, big release. There's one more that has to do with custom functions that I included, and I'll explain. So April 2004, custom functions rolls around. And this is, again, a big turning point in FileMaker, because in every other coding language, you just write your own functions as you need. You have the native functions, and you would write, my function such and such does this with the data that I pass in, and great. As soon as you compile that, you have that function to use. But in FileMaker, and this is where you start to really imagine like how bad it was. in like pre-7. Like, okay, if I just wanted to make like I have a text processing function that I always copy in that's called clean text. And that does a number of native FileMaker functions, trim all, substitute out double spaces, perform capitalization, whatever I want it to do, remove formatting, make it a consistent format, whatever. I have that all chained together so it does it at once. Having to do that as all separate steps, just without variables, even at this point, because that's coming up too, I think. It's crazy.
And one of the big tricks there was that we had a mechanism for having commonly used shared processing, but it was scripts.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a generalized thing that you could do that would apply a particular conversion to some data, you would make a global field, throw the value into the global field, and then call this script. And the script would do the munging. It could do 30 steps. And at the end, you grab the value back out of the global field and put it back where you want it.
Yeah.
And it works. It was totally functional.
And it still works today.
It still works today. That technique did not break. But being able to name that logic, call it from within a calculation, and have it execute in calculation scope was huge.
I mean,
and that's not even counting the new opportunity for things like loop-in calculations.
Yeah. You just look at like briandunning.com and you look at all the functions there and you look at the dates on them. It's this massive explosion of community contributions coming out of version 7 coming out.
Yeah, custom functions were dramatically more migratable than a script that did the same cleanup.
Yeah, because you would have to fix all your references and everything. You couldn't, it wasn't modular in nature.
Yep, awesome.
I remember massive things done with scripts. Yeah.
All right. FileMaker 11. This was really all that I can remember that FileMaker 11 was good for.
You missed something. I think it was around 10 or 10.5 that the inspector became a thing, which is a pretty big deal.
I actually still miss the old interface.
Every app I use that doesn't have a detachable inspector, I get.
I'm not done.
I was really doing it in order.
But no, yeah, nothing's in order. I'm jumping back and forth. I loosely tried to order it by version, but it's already fallen out of version. I think. Yeah, that's 9, that's 7, that's 11. Awesome. I guess there's road work outside today. That's going to pick up on the microphone very well.
Yeah.
All right, so quick find, it's notable, and I've actually used it sheepishly more than I probably should have, because it's just so easy. Like, toss all the layout, or toss all the fields onto a layout you want to query as like a quick search, and then perform. So I'm rolling up the performed quick find script set in this, and the ability to uncheck fields from being in the quick find, and also the ability to turn off quick find for the entire layout. So this whole feature set around quick find is just designed for that fast querying. And it really, when you think about, so you can kind of think about this the same way you can think about how like Google changed searching on the internet as well. You might have gone to a website that says, or you might have gone to a search engine before that says, search for this part of the domain name, search for this part of the page title that comes up in the bar, search for this part in the body content. But Google presented that as one search box, and then it kind of did the figuring out the machine learning part of that to return you the relevant search results. Now, FileMaker doesn't do any sort of machine learning for figuring out prioritization of records, but it's good enough that you can go to a layout, you can perform a find for, like, if I go to a contacts list and I do a find for Smith, I know I'm probably going to come up with a list of people that are on, last name of Smith. And I can control it so that that quick find box only searches on the name fields on that layout and not the address fields. So quick find has been useful since its introduction. I mean, it's that search box in the bar. It's much easier to teach people to search in that box than it is to try to teach them find mode. Find mode, I give like the 5-minute presentation about here's how you use find mode. And this is only the beginning. I don't even get into like super complicated searches. But for quick find, it's like 10 seconds. Type your search in here. This is what found set is. You're good to go. Ta-da! Themes. April 2012. So themes are already this old.
So themes are very sweet.
Going on 6 years old already.
Well, themes came out and they were super awesome, and FileMaker made a bunch of really professional looking themes. And then 13 they made a couple of more, and then 14 like, no, you do it. And we're not going to make any more.
And then 15 we're like, we're getting rid of all the ones we did.
Yeah.
And in 16 they're like, classics no longer supported. I hope you made your theme now. But yeah, I mean, it's the base of the tool that allows FileMaker to be a better product than its competitors. And how this has kind of morphed over the last 4 versions into, the ability to quickly apply styles to all of your layouts that are using a theme just in a couple clicks, rather than having to copy and paste and do stuff. So, probably circa 19 or circa FileMaker 11, somebody was giving the analogy that FileMaker, it's like Excel and Photoshop together. Yeah, I know, but I don't want to.
I know what they're trying to get at.
It's the interface. Yeah. It's the interface and the data, but the interface is an actual WYSIWYG folder.
Yes.
The data is not really Excel, but trying to explain databases to people, they don't care, and they know that Excel is just a thing that stores data in that format. So it's gone from that in version 11 to now you can update that analogy to say that it's more like InDesign and Excel. Yeah, but you look at something like InDesign and it's built for catalog. Photoshop is built for working on one thing. So InDesign is designed to have styles that apply to a whole 500-page catalog. And if somebody walks in and says, I don't like that font, you're not going to 500 different Photoshop files to update that. You're going to your catalog style, updating that. I'm guessing that in the future they're going to take this to just full-blown allowances for CSS editing. Hopefully they'll allow us to integrate like CSS packages, like to see the kind of some sort of JavaScript component too, wink wink, bootstrap, nudge nudge.
Your mouth to God's ears.
From my mouth and through the toilet and everything. I don't know how that's even possible, but that kind of stuff where like it would be awesome to be able to send a percentage width value on an object and have it respect that. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and at DEF CON, if they show that off as like a preview this year, we can now I'm going to text you and say, holy. Right, so, all right. Another FileMaker 12. So FileMaker 12 obviously was the one where they put in a lot of effort into it with the file format change. So I guess the file format changes do bring along big things, which should be interesting to see what, if or when the next file format change happens, what that's going to look like. I'm assuming it's going to come soon based on what they...
VR.
Nah. I don't think you're going to get it. I think it's going to be based on actually my theory, and we can look this up on YouTube like 4 years from now, is that the roadmap things that they've outlined for how users are going to change is going to force them to finally change the file format. So they're looking to switch to a user-centric model where the users are kind of agnostic to the files. So think of like Active Directory for like SharePoint access or something like that. You can do that integration now, but you're not actually replacing what FileMaker has as its security layer.
There's one thing,
This has nothing to do with what we're looking at on the screen right now. Right.
you see that being a big deal. FileMaker's got really good security, but it's also a lot of work for a developer or a team to set up and make sure you're taking full advantage of it.
The default login to a file is still admin with no password.
So.
Oh, and I'll after we're done with the meeting, I need to show you the thing I showed Joe earlier today. I'm not going to put that on YouTube because I'll probably get a cease and desist, but it's an interesting thing. So insert from URL version 12. This has really changed how we interact with FileMaker before with, I would say, the web and FileMaker. Before this, and I do remember this because it was the way we were doing things before insert from URL came around, so I had to deal with this for 4-ish versions. Web scraping was the thing to do. You create a URL with some parameter as part of the URL. The result gets displayed in the web viewer. You hope that it rendered by the time your script finishes pausing and grabs the resulting value out of it. Web scraping is still a thing, and it's still useful. But insert from URL guarantees that what it puts in your text box is the resulting HTML code of that page that rendered. It guarantees that what it puts in your container is that file that it grabbed from that location, so that you can programmatically check for a positive or negative result. And that's something that web scraping didn't really allow you to do all that well. So this is another one of those things that's been built on over the course of the past couple versions, where now it supports full-blown post requests with curl components to be able to just do API calls, complete API integrations. And that's amazing. So it's not even so much insert from URL anymore as it's, it's
Curl for FileMaker.
Yeah, it's curl for FileMaker, or I would say insert from integration.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I mean, going forward, the features that they've developed along into this script set have just taken us to that next level of using the web. And something that a lot of people don't think about in terms of insert from URL is you can consume your own FileMaker URLs through it. So, like if you have a data API set up and you have another file on a different server, you can build a sync solution by using insert from URL to hit the data API on the other FileMaker server and pull records and push records.
You can also pull the contents of like text files or CSVs, things like that.
Yeah. But you could do that before they added the curl options. So this is another one of those things where as a community today, we still haven't even explored the limits of what this function can do. Especially after the additions in 16. I mean, people are still wrapping their head around how to do the curl options in 16, and we're going to get there. I mean, but like you look at when the court has a curl library for insert from URL that's like just helper functions, like helper custom functions to use this, and it's like 80 functions for constructing the URL out of different curl parameters and everything. So there's a ton out there, but it's now in a format that we can kind of consume and digest all that awesome information that's not a part of our system. Dave's other favorite, and also my fast favorite, mostly because I'm speaking about this as an actual topic at CPDF next month. The let function, another one of the FileMaker 7 milestones, and I think the reason why this becomes such a big factor is just taking a look at somebody's attempt to write a similar function from before FileMaker 7. The big one for me was nested if statements.
Ooh.
Sometimes 7 levels deep,
Yep.
and it works in FileMaker because it works in FileMaker. It's designed to process what you give it, and if you give it something that's valid, no matter how awful it is to look at on paper, it'll power through it and be a trooper about it. But let really allows you to use calculations with a syntax that just makes sense to programmers. And once you learn how to just basically use the let function, anytime you have to do something that's not a case statement, that's more than one line, you're using let. You're just open up calculation, mention let, open the brackets, everything good to go.
I've joked a number of times that I've been threatening for years to make every single calculation a let. Just, if it's more than just 1 or 0, make a let. Make the inputs.
I'm not on board with that. I'm not on board with that yet, but I am finally on board with never using if and only using case. And I'm going to disseminate that opinion to a bunch of Canadians next month. But I might be exiled from Montreal. We'll see.
I use it. It has a different connotation. I intend for there to be 2 possibilities here.
Yeah.
Or 1 condition in check.
Right.
This or anything else.
Yeah.
It's different than this ambiguously something else maybe in the future.
But it's not ambiguously something else. It's a case or the default response.
Yeah, but you're coding in such a way that it can be this or something else later that I haven't decided about yet.
Yeah.
I see his point. I got it.
And that was my point before I started just doing it for a while, and now I just do it. It's all case. So let is, I mean, I couldn't imagine what that first generation of custom functions would have looked like if let didn't.
Yeah, the two really work as pairs. I have long considered the use of the let function to be one of my indicators for the level of experience and comfort of a developer. If you have not figured out how to use the let function, that's your next task.
Right.
At almost every level. It's going to make all your code easier to work with. It's going to make it easier to write, easier to maintain, easier to debug, everything. And the problem is that the function just looks a little weird, and so people try and avoid it, and don't. Let is up there with virtual lists. Like, just, this is a technique that you have to have.
But it's also, I mean, the ability to set script local, calculation local, and global variables out of the calculation engine as a huge advancement. It still respects all of the other kind of dirty nesting that you want to do. So you can do a let inside of a let inside of a let. If you really want to, you can. Wait, no, not 3 levels?
No,
You can do 2 levels.
it'll totally do it. I'm shaking.
Oh yeah, you're shaking your head like, don't do that. Yeah. All right. But so yeah, this was that's a big turning point. And speaking of variables, next one is variables, which it's kind of hard to imagine that when our user group first met, a variable wasn't a thing in FileMaker. You were still doing that global thing where stick a value in a global field and get it sometime later.
Yep. The ability to do a recursive script and track local script state that could handle increasing depth, and then as the thing cascaded back, that you could still pick up what that global-ish value was at that time was amazing. And just the combination of those three, that like let, variables, and custom functions, each of them made all of the others more powerful.
They were all stressed out. I mean, they had to hold it off till FileMaker 8. And since this is the version I started in, I was like, it didn't seem like I'd ever missed it. So, man, it must have been awful for you guys. Because you have to think, my experience with programming before coming to FileMaker was PHP and WordPress development and HTML and CSS, where you had variables. It was like just like day one, like somebody's like, I'm going to make a new programming language. What's like the first thing you have to do? Okay, hello world. Second thing you have to do, let's do variables and functions. Like, and you got custom functions in 7 and variables in version 8, and it's like, what the heck were you guys doing for the last 20 years?
You weren't doing it.
Right. Yeah.
August of 2005 was 11 years into my FileMaker development experience.
Oh.
I had a customer who has a very old file. There are occasionally scripts I come across with the whole copy and paste from one day to another. And I'm used to replacing those. There was one in particular, and I'm not sure if they were having a bad day when they wrote this one. But instead of doing copy, go to layout, paste, it was copy, go to layout, paste, go to layout, copy, back and forth. 40 times.
That was a FileMaker 2, we didn't have set field.
Right.
Set field was introduced. If we'd gone back to FileMaker 3, there's another half a dozen things that you just do not know what life was not like. Because to move, we had no relationships. So I couldn't shove a value into a global even and go over and pick it up. The only way to move a value between 2 files was export and import, a lookup, or the clipboard.
This was during the Cold War.
So it's actually funny. I answered a question on the community yesterday.
The wall fall.
Answered a question in the community yesterday. Somebody didn't know the difference between a local and a global variable. They were like, well, they were setting a global variable because when they looked at their data viewer, they didn't see the variable because the script just ran like that. You never saw it. I was like, oh, okay, well, open up your script debugger and learn how to use it and step through. And I was like, unless you really need that, don't set it, because then you're going to end up with all of the variables in your file in your data viewer as they populate. Oh, and it's dangerous because somebody with FileMaker Pro Advanced and the ability to open that up would be able to change those values, maybe altering the system. So variables were a big change. It changed fundamentally the way we developed. I've never really used that global field thing because I never had to.
Right.
Like I came from PHP where I didn't have to do it, and by the time I made it to FileMaker in 8, lucky me. If I started in 2 versions back, I probably would have been a completely different developer than the person I am today. That's a scary thought. Modern container fields. April of 2012 with FileMaker 12. And I'm saying modern because it was really like, I don't know if modern is the right word or if fully featured container fields is. They heavily borrowed a lot of their functionality from a popular plugin called Super Container.
Which is still Flutter long.
Okay, so that's the level of modern that you're talking about. Because container fields changed dramatically in like 7.
Or even earlier, but yeah.
Well, let's just take external container storage as a big feature. Secure container storage coming out of external container storage. So that's stuff that was a result of them fundamentally overhauling the container object in version 12. Insert from URL supporting containers, version 12. There's a definite turning point with how the container object functions prior to this point in history. That's all I'm getting at. I mean, the reason it's such a big deal to me is because I came from being a PHP developer where dealing with files and getting a file to a screen to show to a user is stupid hard. It's not hard anymore because people have written packages that you can integrate and say, I want this file displayed in this viewer with these parameters. So that comes along, the modern packages come along for those coding languages and it works. But in FileMaker, it's like, I put it on a layout and it works. If it's an audio file, you get the play control in there. If it's a PDF, you get a preview. If it's an image, it automatically resizes to fill the, all
Because
of
it inherently knows what.
thumbnails is another one that came out in another thing that feature of 12 that wasn't before. Automatically generated and ability to cache thumbnails.
Being able to see more than just the first page of a PDF.
Still depends on your integrated viewer.
It's at least theoretically possible now.
Theoretically, yeah. Yeah,
What we did
sometimes,
before was 2 exporting.
sometimes containers can still be a little thorn in your side. They have difficulties. They perform differently depending on what OS you're using. But for the most part, this was a big turning point, and it's something that you can do, and you can do faster than the guy that's writing like the web application or the Java application. Like to write a Java application where you put a file on a screen is a nightmare. Like you've got to program everything. You're basically programming what FileMaker has already programmed for you. The entire conduit to pull that data, how to display it, the objects of it. So the ability to drag it and drop it on a layout, resize it, set it, style it, etc., and push and pull contents to and from it. All great features. This one's just too big to list, but it really kicked off in FileMaker 9. Or I may not have actually updated this slide.
I think it's 7.
When did they add? They added SSL certificates in like version 10, though.
Okay. It depends upon which cumulative security you're talking about.
I think I missed this slide when I was going back and setting the version numbers for things, because this is probably should be 7, yes. 7 was the introduction of the username and password individual accounts.
The thing in my head is that it was privilege sets.
Yeah.
Is that you could share, you could have the same privilege set assigned to 10 users, but still give each of them their own login and password.
I'm going to change this now so I don't forget. 7 plus. There we go. That works. Save it for later and post the slides on the community. So yeah,
and then along with multiple tables in a single file, then you could theoretically write a 100 table system and have one common set of access privileges with 1,000 accounts tied to 7 different access privileges. If you needed to adjust the access privileges, you just updated the privilege set, and all of the relevant accounts were updated automatically, basically.
The reason that this cumulative feature is so important to me is when I first got into FileMaker development, a lot of people ignore security, and it's a bad habit that's held over from kind of the senior level development crowd. And senior level, I'm talking about people that have been developing 10 plus years, that have been developing before version 7, is their opinion, their take on security was security through obscurity, which just means I'm not worried about security because I don't think anybody's ever gonna try to hack my FileMaker file. And it's just awful. The admin with no password for a new file is something that drives me nuts every time. The first thing I do when I create a file is set up a privilege set, change the name of the admin account to not be admin, and give it a highly secure password of at least 16 characters mixed upper and lower case.
I just use like a file template for every version of FileMaker.
Yeah,
Upgrade that.
should probably do that.
Just
Except
like,
I'll probably forget the password. But
I use something, I log it, but I'll use a couple of security things. I'll also create a menu set based on that version of FileMaker and disable things like delete all records or something like that. Things that I'm going to do anyway.
yeah. So, I mean, that drives me nuts, and that's why, you get people in the community that are perceived as a little, maybe tinfoil hat because they're giving these security warnings. They're saying, hey, it is wrong for you to host this. But, it would be taboo for me to sit at DEF CON, see how many local servers people are running with admin no password, where I can just access their file, and I can write a 3-line script that will take down your computer. Just loop new record. Eventually, that file is going to be large enough where it crashes your computer. Or eventually, that script is going to run long enough where it crashes your memory. But leaving your file exposed like that, it's just, it blows my mind that people leave it exposed. And it's a huge pet peeve of mine. So as people have continued to kind of ignore these security features, I'm on the other side telling FileMaker, yes, keep doing these things. Keep making it so that it's easier to integrate SSL certificates into our server. Keep making it so that more and more you're required to encrypt your files at rest. Keep making it so, keep rolling out these security features. So encryption at rest, the password strength indicator that's in the set a new password thing, the ability to give a privilege set a minimum password length.
So many people, a lot of the customers I have came to me from other FileMaker developers, but for some reason or other, they decided not to work with them anymore. And one feature that every one of my customers has gotten in the last 3 years is the security audit. Every time, it's not a very costly thing, but it's the first thing we do.
Yeah.
And every time there's problems.
Yeah. And I think it's a service that should be required for every platinum shop to advertise, every FBA partner to advertise that you do a security audit. I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation for anybody that's in the FBA program to have a security policy that says, sorry, we will not enable guest access for a public-facing LAN system. There's no reason to anymore. If you want anonymous logins for WebDirect, you can create a URL that posts the credentials now. There are secure ways to do everything that you need to do in FileMaker. So the cumulative features are, they're tops, they're worth recognizing. And Yeah, I knew we were getting around to this. Now we're actually running out of time because we have like 13 minutes left. So we'll kind of breeze through however many left there are. Perform script on server, obviously, just from a performance standpoint of increasing the performance that you can do. Just amazing what perform script on server did.
I really wish it was there instead.
I really wish it was there. Really wish it was there from day one of server, FileMaker Server 3.
If there is a FileMaker feature that I overuse,
Yeah, definitely.
I abuse this very.
I will, any server now that we deploy that doesn't have a sync aspect where it's syncing data to offline clients, we usually bump up the AWS recommendation from like T2 medium to T2 like large, just specifically so they have the extra processing power to do all the performance script on server actions. I mean, it's mandatory for WAN performance to use performance script on server. Because
anytime I need to go somewhere else to get data, I would use it.
Yeah.
Anytime I have create a whole bunch of records, I would use it.
So December 2013, FileMaker 13. That's right when we started to fall off the version number matching the year. So I wrote 17 so much in this when I was meant 16. And WebDirect. This one's personal for me. Not just because I was the guy that presented the deadline twice about it, but because I was the guy that saw from announcement 0 day, day one, like how big of a deal this was. And people still don't think it's a big deal. It's a big deal. They made it better. They keep making it better. You can now support 500 users on WebDirect, which is just crazy. And people don't want to have to install software to use things. So the modern day, thin client web browser application, WebDirect is Android compatible. It's the only thing that is, and it's probably going to be the only thing that is. Just from what's the not device creep or whatever. I forget what the term is that you have to support. Fragmentation. Yeah. Fragmentation is so bad with Android that versus iOS that I don't think you can realistically expect to see FileMaker Go for Android. So just from a perspective. So what WebDirect does, is it delivers that FileMaker thin client experience through a browser without you having to do anything other than what you were already doing in FileMaker. You don't have to write a single line of PHP or HTML or CSS, And we, at work, we just ran a 1 week long FileMaker Cloud 100 users server specifically to handle 1,000 students coming in for WebDirect.
Yeah, but how does, that's the part that I don't understand. It was made for that model of using concurrent licensing, and then they changed the licensing.
I don't want to get into it. We don't have enough time to get into the licensing debate. I'm going to moderate this and cut that off.
I could no longer use FileMaker after a certain point for my customers because they would have to buy, according to reading the letter of the agreement at the time, from 2015, they would have had to buy 2,000 seats for FileMaker WebDirect to do one instance of a parent registration on web form.
Yeah.
As opposed to just IPv parent.
Yeah, that's the sales.
It's like
the sales department, struggling with the engineering department. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not.
So I don't know how to fit it into my business anymore because anyone who comes to me that wants a web presence, they want a public web presence. They don't really care about having just their staff using a web app. They're just being fine in that case.
Well, we still. Different clients have different needs.
Yeah,
but we do have the WebDirect users where they are office staff. FileMaker Cloud, and nope, that wasn't the list. So let's breeze through the last couple here. FileMaker Cloud rolling out as a server product in 2016. What really puts this one on the map is it kind of reinforces this chain of like FileMaker becoming a modern app presence in both the way you design the interface and the methods of which it's delivered to the clients and the way it's hosted, the way it's portable, the way it's scalable, the way it's hosted. So FileMaker Cloud really introduced the concept of being able to scale your server. And as that part of that project last week, I actually had to scale the server because it was getting so much demand that it was running the AWS CPU at 100%, and we were getting angry messages about it. So for us to upgrade that was a 3-click process where we just didn't have to do anything else but wait the 5 minutes it took to detach your drive, like essentially blow away that FileMaker Cloud instance, create a new one from scratch, and reattach your drive on a new instance.
That part blows my mind. Like they described how it goes from version to version.
Yeah. So it doesn't migrate your server at all. It just creates a new server and attaches your drive to it, and you're ready to go. So I think the downtime was like 13 minutes while we upgraded from an M4 2X large to an M4 10X large.
As opposed to a weekend.
$2 an hour for the 10X large, man. But that thing has like 36 processor cores and 164 gigs of RAM. It's amazing.
So this was the one feature. There was a time when I was kind of like backing out of FileMaker entirely because I didn't really see it having a future as a platform. I just didn't really see like they hadn't published a roadmap. People were asking for it. They were saying no. They were saying nothing. It was when they published this, an off-cycle release. They just kind of like, here is this that maybe maybe they do have a plan.
Yeah.
Long term.
And they're sticking to that plan. So this is now coherent with version 16, where they've added in the missing features, and in some ways FileMaker Cloud's ahead. So the admin API is in FileMaker Cloud. That scaling feature is in FileMaker Cloud. That's not something you can do with FileMaker Server. If I want to upgrade my Windows AWS FileMaker Server 16 to a different instance, I actually have to, I can still do the EBS, detach my drive and reattach it somewhere else, but I'm doing all that myself. There's no 3-click process, and it's going to be like a couple hours that your server's offline while we're doing that. And then I'm charging you for that instead of the 5 minutes it takes me to click a couple buttons. So I think having this commitment towards kind of the future platform for the distribution network, not to mention that it's Linux, so it's cheaper than the Windows AWS. And with the feature set coming along, it's finally going to be there. Like, it's almost there. I think once September of this year, when they roll out the 17 version of FileMaker Cloud, that it'll really take off.
It's been a while since I checked, but can you get discrete backups from it yet? Can you get, it's like, run a backup and give me a copy of the file?
You can download a copy of the file, and it generates a downloaded zip file for you.
I want yesterday's file at 7 p.m.
So
I don't want the entire instance.
You have to understand the difference between a snapshot and a drive.
And I'm asking, they said that, I understand the snapshot process, but they also said at some point, it was during the...
Yes, you, essentially it's a couple of clicks process where you mount the snapshot into a drive and then you can download that drive.
Okay. Initially that wasn't there. Like
it's not a one-click download of a snapshot though.
But you could get the file without restoring your server.
Yes.
Okay. Because initially it was, you had to restore your server to the snapshot and then get it, which was not ideal.
All right, data API new as of this past year. This is a big deal, and it's really not just, oh, and that was the last one. So yeah, we're on the last one. So 3 minutes. This is another one of those where it kind of builds on previous successes. You know, this has kind of evolved from CMDL into PHP Site Assistant, into IWP, into the PHP and CWP, or PHP and XML APIs, and finally, they're like, hey, all of that stuff we've done before now has been like this proprietary BS that has kind of alienated non-FileMaker developers from tying in and integrating with our platform. So what is the standard that everybody else in the world is using for their APIs? Let's do that. And it's the data API. It should just be called the REST API because it is the REST API that pulls data out of FileMaker. But this is the most recent and modern turning point of FileMaker in terms of how it interacts with everything outside.
I wonder if they call it the data API instead of making a schema API coming later or a design API.
Well, there's an admin API that's with FileMaker Cloud. That's the only way you can manage schedules and stuff with FileMaker Cloud. It's not actually in the interface.
That's cool.
For the admin console. So yeah, I mean, there are different APIs. As far as the schema API, I don't know. There's some stuff they've mentioned in the roadmap. All right, well, I was hoping to have more time here to hang out and show this off, especially thanks to Beverly both for pulling through at the last minute and digging up a license key of FileMaker Pro 6 for me. But this is FileMaker Pro 6. So 15 years ago when this user group met, they were looking at this version of FileMaker. Now I've actually used Wine, which is a program to run Windows programs to be able to run this on my Mac. And I got it to work, I got it installed, I got past the Adobe errors that it couldn't register because I didn't have Acrobat. And here we are. So let's create let's do a template, contact management. Okay, FP5. It's gonna chug along here and create something. So you can see, like, at some point of time, they strayed away from the top-down approach. You know, they added that sidebar for like version 7 through 10. I think they removed that in 11. You remember the thing with the page, the folding page on the left-hand column?
I'm trying to remember exactly what version it had. It would have been 7.
I think it was from 7 to 11, or 7 to 10, and then they removed it in 11 in preparation for 12.
I mean, this looks like any Windows application for 20 years.
Oh,
Yep.
Yep, it really does. But I mean, going back and talking to continuity of this platform where version to version things are the same, like look at the menus up at the top. File, edit, view, insert, format, record, scripts, window, help. Nothing has changed. That's all the same as what we've got now. The names of the script steps. You know, obviously, how can you change something that's so simple? But it is that continuous experience. So, oh man, yeah, this is great. I don't even, I see it. Resize this, and we're on Windows, so we got the window inside of the window, which is another thing that's been updated since. So you got layout menus, This design is actually what I think of when I think of like classic FileMaker. This kind of like toolbar up here that has the different views in it and stuff, the way it was made for you. Like my first exposure to FileMaker was like this type of design because people were like, it wasn't as design forward as it was since 12 has been. And you've got people out there now like Angel City Data that's winning like design awards every year at DEF CON because they come up with these amazing looking FileMaker systems that, you come back to a place like this and it wouldn't be really possible. Even the way it like renders graphics on the screen, you can't have a smooth curve because you get a jagged edge on a crappy 8-bit GIF that you try to put on your screen. And now you can do full 256 PNG directly on your layout. So even just from that standpoint, it's good. Zoom in here. So yeah, I mean, I didn't create a record. What? But all this stuff is here. The process is still kind of similar to what it was.
Oh, what's recovery like in this?
What's
It
what?
looks almost exactly the same. They only get defined fields.
Yeah.
Or define relationships.
Define relationships. Define fields because it's only one table per file.
Yeah.
So look,
That's it.
we've got all these amazing field types here.
I want to see relationships.
That is actually a fun one there is
actually-
6. Global is a field type in 6,
Yeah.
not a storage option.
In some ways, I wish this was actually still a thing. Because when I get one of those relationship graphs that looks like a scatter plot exploding, like I wish I had a list view of those relationships to look at.
You do.
Now,
You have to say, you do. FM perception.
yes. I was also going to say you can use the design functions to get relationship info. And there's a recursive custom function out there that'll actually go through your file and get all the relationships and
Yeah,
output.
then you have to read it with your eyes.
Yeah.
Just by the perception.
But yeah,
Now.
so
So it's the similar multi-key. Go look at that definition on the right-hand side. You can't get there from here. You got to drill back out.
yeah, I got to go to another file to get there.
There's 6.
No, it's all one file.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well then, multi-key, similar multi-key calculation.
Return the limited keys so you can make a relationship
Wait, so
on
was
multiple criteria.
list not a function back?
It was just a big.
What was that?
Hey, list wasn't a function back then.
No. No. As a matter of fact, if you just look at that, we've got left and left words, but not left values. So, or get value. None of those things were there. So every time you wanted to do one, every time you wanted to do something that treated the values that way for extracting something value-based, you had to do the counting the number of returns, finding the things between the two returns and pulling that value out. And there were no custom functions. So you had to write the entire calculation every single time.
Yep. Oh man. Oh.
Yeah, calculating monster.
I used a multi-value.
Wait, so we're
Where what?
That's your entire storage options?
do you not have validation? Like, did they not add validation?
You don't validate calculations.
Options.
Oh.
Okay, that's more.
We have a couple fewer tabs, but
Yeah.
most of these options are similar,
Do you have serial numbers?
Yeah.
but they're just serial numbers.
The creation. Nice.
So, I don't know that I've ever noticed that before.
Yeah, I don't either.
The-
That's fun.
No, but it's auto enter the creation date.
Anytime I see like it's just you automatically just have flashbacks living in Columbus to some sports guy on TV run the Ohio State University.
But yeah, like looked up values. If you had, it works basically the same. Pick from the related thing, and then go from there. But the trick was that you could only get one step away.
Yeah, you don't
So
have any context. Wait, do you have context in your calculations?
No,
What's interesting to me is
because there is only one context for the table. It's the table.
Yeah. And there's no cancel button here.
No, it's just done.
All right.
But there's so much of that stuff that, that goes way back. All that stuff.
Info about this template. So we are over our time. So as much as I'd like to continue this trip down nostalgia lane, I'm going to end here. I'm going to leave this on my laptop. So if anybody wants to play around with it in future meetings, just feel free. I'm going to use this as a conversation piece at DevCon this year. Like, hey, do you remember what FileMaker 6 looked like?
You gotta go back into layout mode and see the no inspector.
Yeah. Oh, time that we do have a moment to piss off Joe. No inspector.
Yeah, we just had that little thing.
Yeah, a little size thing.
You get the sizing. This is your inspector, Joe.
Yeah, that's the inspector. Just go away.
Joe's already put on his VR headset so he can ignore all this. All right. Well, that is COFMUG February 2018, our 15-year anniversary. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this look back.